So I think it's finally time that we talk about Jaune and how he appears in the Volume 9 opening, where we see him in silhouette with all of these different clocks behind him. We know that the writers like to include a lot of different things in the openings of the volumes that hint at things to come later on, and once we see how the volume unfolds, what we see in the opening starts to make more sense. So this is obviously going to be something very relevant to Jaune's story, and there are a couple notable things about the clock that I feel are going to be very important. Notably that every clock face that we see in this image is missing the number 11. Instead, it is actually replaced with the number 12. And if we're going in the logical progression of time, 10 has to move to 11 for time to actually move forward. So quite possibly, time is actually stopped and can't progress past 2 o'clock at somewhere in the ever after. Maybe that's Jaune's personal time or something of that nature. But this could be a clear indication that time is stopped, just as it had stopped in the actual Wonderland story, where it is stopped at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and it is always tea time. Now, obviously, this isn't showing 6 o'clock, this is 2 o'clock, and in the ever after, maybe 2 o'clock is tea time. Although it is based on Wonderland, things can certainly work out differently, and if Jaune is stuck at tea time, then maybe Neo has some influence on that as well. But if that is the case, that these clock faces are supposed to show that time is stopped, they didn't necessarily have to replace the number 11. They could have replaced any other number on the clock. So why 11 specifically? This was something that I mentioned in the analysis video I did on the Volume 9 opening, and I wasn't exactly sure what the significance of the missing 11th number on the clock would mean. But as many people pointed out in the comments below, it could be signifying the 11th hour, which is often interpreted as the last chance. And Jaune, with his story and how it's unfolded, especially in Volume 8, when he wasn't able to save Penny, it could be referring to how Jaune is always too late. He was too late to save Pyrrha, and he was too late to save Penny. But that's not exactly accurate. He was too late to save Pyrrha, but he was not too late to save Weiss at the end of Volume 5. That showed the progression of his training, how he started to master his aura, and at that moment, he awakened his semblance, and he was able to get there in that 11th hour to save Weiss. And then in Volume 8, it wasn't that he was too late to save Penny, it was that he ended up taking her life with his own hands. The only other image that we see of Jaune in the Volume 9 opening, outside of him quite possibly being the Rusted Knight, is him kind of colored and shaded in pastel yellow, but with one glaring spot of color, that being the spot of Penny's blood on his sword. And that could be the possible meaning of the 11 being replaced with a 12. That the 11th hour didn't exist. That instead, Jaune was the one who pushed it from 10 to 12, meaning that he pushed it to the end. He was the one who ended Penny's life, that it is more significant by what is replacing the 11 than the actual absence of the 11. Because if we look at those 3 instances where Jaune may have had the opportunity to save someone. With Pyrrha, at the end of Volume 3, it was Pyrrha herself who pushed Jaune away, knowing that he was not strong enough to face the foe that she was going up against. So she pushed him away and prevented him from even trying. He was not strong enough to save Pyrrha. And we saw how that affected his mentality in Volume 4. He presumably spent time training every single night. When everyone else was resting and recuperating, he was watching the old instructional videos of Pyrrha, trying to hone his skills and get stronger so that when the time came again, he would not be too late. And in Volume 5, he wasn't too late. He was able to save Weiss. And in Volume 6, when he finally got that closure, able to talk with the rest of his team at the statue of Pyrrha that they saw in Argus, how Jaune was able to come to terms with the fact that even Pyrrha realized she wasn't strong enough, but she knew she was the only one that could try. And even as he progressed into Volumes 7 and 8, we can see Jaune growing more confident, becoming a good leader, arguably even a better leader than RWBY at this point in the story. He was level-headed, able to assess the situation, knew to split up the groups, that both tasks were achievable, so long as everyone was able to keep a level head, worked together, and continued to make progress towards their overall goals. And honestly, out of all of our main characters in Volume 8, he was probably the most mentally stable and in control throughout all of it. Ren even confirms this when he, Jaune, and Yang went inside Monstra to rescue Oscar. Ren at this point could see Jaune's emotions and see that he was confident, that he wasn't afraid. He believed that they would get the job done, that they would succeed in saving Oscar. he didn't believe that their missions would fail. And because he had that much faith, he also had the farthest to fall. That is why, when things fell apart, it would hit Jaune the hardest, especially being the only one out of everyone that would take someone else's life, which happened in the Volume 8 finale, when he ended up taking Penny's life with his own hands. He made it in time to possibly save her, but she requested that he not. Instead, use his blade to help her pass on the powers to Winter. Although this was on Penny's request, in that 11th hour, he, instead of saving Penny's life, pushed that 11 to 12. And I think that is possibly the significance of the 11 being replaced by a 12 on the clock faces that we see in the Volume 9 opening. That Jaune feels like a complete and utter failure, that it wouldn't even matter if he arrived in that last moment to save someone because he just ended up taking someone's life instead. And thus, maybe his own time is staying still. I'm not exactly sure the significance of the clock being stopped at 2, other than it quite possibly being the tea time in the Ever After, but we already know that time has actually progressed forward in the Ever After. That Jinxie seems older, that the Red King is missing, and the Red Prince is now in charge. So the timeline has actually progressed from Alex's time in the Ever After, and so maybe Jaune's time individually is stopped. Maybe there is significance for the time being stopped at 2 exactly. That we'll find out later in the volumes. If you have any extra insight, let me know down in the comments below. But for right now, I think it's most significant that the time cannot move past the 10 marker on the clock. That instead the 11 is replaced with a 12, and that is likely reflecting Jaune's mentality that even in the 11th hour, he finishes the hour rather than taking that opportunity to save someone. He is absolutely going to be hung up on Penny's demise. He had always dreamed of becoming a hero, had put so much time and effort into becoming stronger, into becoming a huntsman that he always dreamed of being, and was finally on that path to being able to save people. He was able to save Weiss, and he was helping people in Atlas. He was being the person he always dreamed of. And then he took a friend's life. By her own request, yes, but that is going to weigh heavy on him. That is going to tear him up inside, and given how we know the Ever After is going to interact with people and their emotions, how when RWBY was sad, the world cried, how we've seen the way that the Ever After reacts with Neo's semblance, then with Jaune, the grief, the sorrow, the anger, the frustration, and all of this mix of emotions that he's going to feel, that might have had some negative effects on his own mentality. Quite possibly stopping his own time. Maybe there was another character in the Ever After that was able to take advantage of Jaune and the turmoil that he's going through. Maybe time in and of itself, because we know that time is an actual character in the Alice in Wonderland stories, so maybe we're going to see the physical manifestation of time. Maybe that's the blacksmith, because I know in Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, or Through the Looking Glass, time appeared as an almost mechanical being, and we know that the blacksmith seems to be a pretty mechanical person as well, so maybe the blacksmith has something to do with time in some way. And again, that leads to the quest of slaying the Jabberwocker, Jaune getting his new sword, which is the Vorpal sword, maybe something like that. I'm just trying to connect a lot of dots of the different theories that I have, but time is certainly going to be a factor in this story. Given the clocks appearing behind Jaune, at least that's what it's indicating, but I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think is significant about this image? What do you think the relevance of the clock being stopped at 2 o'clock is going to be? And do you think that there is more meaning hidden in the fact that the 11th hour is replaced with a 12? Do you agree with my interpretation of why the 11 was changed to a 12 and what that means for Jaune? How he pushed the 11th hour to a 12 by taking Penny's life in that moment, even though, again, it was by her own request? I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm not really too confident on how exactly this is going to play out, because we haven't really seen anything time-related so far in the Ever After, other than time has actually progressed forward from Alex's time. So I feel like we're going to have to see more in Volume 9 to be able to tell for sure, and at that point I'll probably make a follow-up video. But for now, I'll just wait and see what you guys think. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. If you're a fan of No Game No Life, make sure to subscribe to my second channel, The Daily Flugel. And if you want to see some games played live, make sure to check out my Twitch channel, linked in the description below. I stream every Tuesday and Saturday. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.